Hi, I'm Jay, and I've got an agenda. The first thing on my agenda is the topic of speeding on the highway. Now, I know that all of us have been driving on the highway only to be passed by somebody who is exceeding the speed limit even by 40, perhaps even 50 miles an hour. You may have seen these people weaving in and out of traffic, even in conditions where it's not safe, especially in conditions where it's not safe, when traffic's a little heavy and they seem to be taking a risk. Does speeding really save us time? The U.S. Army conducted a study, and I'm not sure exactly when this study was conducted, but they did a study where they tested trips of 15, 30, 50, and 200 miles, and each were driven at speeds of 35 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, and 65 miles per hour. And their research showed that without taking into account traffic congestion or traffic signals, how long these trips would take at 10 and 20 miles above the speed limits. The result was that going that fast, faster than that, would save you less than 6 minutes. But bear in mind, and I want you to remember, that this was without traffic congestion and without traffic lights. Interestingly, that Army survey found that the higher the speed limit, the less time would be saved. I know that sounds odd. It should be the other way around, but there's the data to back it up. So why do people drive fast? Why do people speed? Well, the question of why people speed has also been analyzed by researchers. And when all of that data, all of those reasons are bundled together, when they're condensed, well, it comes down to one simple reason why. A couple of weeks ago, I pulled into a 7-Eleven and I noticed this sign in the window. And I don't know why I stopped and gave it so much thought, but I thought to myself, 38,000 people in a country where the population is 332 million is almost a statistically insignificant number. And I also thought, well, how can they prove that it's secondhand smoke? So I decided to look at some numbers, and I went to the CDC. Now, the CDC actually puts that number at 41,000. But again, 41,000 deaths in a population of 332 million doesn't seem like that's a very big public health risk. So why is the sign up there? I mean, how do they know that secondhand smoke is actually the primary cause of 41,000 deaths? I mean, there are places in this country where the air pollution is far worse than secondhand smoke. And why does this kind of warning have to be put up in the window? Is that really going to discourage somebody from buying a pack of cigarettes when they're already addicted anyway? That simply doesn't make any sense, other than there's been some lawyers that made a lot of money off of some lawsuits. And I got to thinking, we are confronted, I guess, with information every day, warnings, this and that, notices and other things. But do we really stop and consider the nature of the rhetoric Do we ask ourselves, why is this there? Who is telling us this? Why are they telling us this? Who paid for this? Does this really apply to me? Is this true? These kinds of questions should be asked every time that you're reading anything. So the last thing on my agenda has to do with an emerging crisis of legitimacy. And oh, by the way, this is my little buddy. I happen to be his emotional support animal for the weekend. What do I mean about a crisis of legitimacy? Our political and governing institutions are in a very deep crisis of legitimacy. The ruling class has brought it on themselves, and now they have no way of putting this crisis back in the bottle. They have no way of resolving this. What do I mean by the crisis of legitimacy? It means that the ruling elite can no longer rule us in the old way, and that we, the people, are beginning to refuse to be ruled in the old way. The Italian political prisoner Gramsci once wrote that the old is dying and the new is struggling to be born. And that's what's happening in the United States today. This explains the socio-political crisis. This explains these political and civil upheavals. This explains the growing restlessness and the simmering anger that is posing a threat to the present political, social, and economic order. All of the ruling class institutions have lost, or they are rapidly losing, their legitimacy in the regard of the citizens, in the regard of the masses. Let's take the media to start with. The most trusted name in news is no longer trusted at all. I mean, we're all beginning to understand that the major media outlets, be they print or be they visual or electronic, what have you, are all shilling for the ideological narrative of the ruling class. Polls have shown that congressional approval has tanked. Courts are bent to the will of the powerful. And even our military power has lost its legitimacy. More, not only here at home. First of all, I'm sure that you've heard that last year in 2023, the U.S. military came up 41,000 recruits short. That is, they couldn't fill their ranks. Well, why is that? Well, it's because those who are eligible to serve don't want to serve the interests of the ruling class. They don't want to go fight those wars anymore that have absolutely no benefit to them or are of any necessary defensive action to our country. It's all to defend the interests of the ruling elite. Not only that, U.S. military power is being challenged throughout the world and is proving to be far weaker than we were led to believe that it was. All the branches of government, agencies, institutions are losing their credibility. They're losing their legitimacy. We see a damage being done in the electoral process. Recently, the Democrat Party bosses, not the voters, in 4 states decided to exclude all other Democrat presidential candidates from the primary election ballots in their states. That's not democratic. That has nothing to do with democracy. That is a ruling elite class setting the terms of an election. The electoral college votes of these 4 states equal 66 electoral votes. Now, that's intended not only to prevent any organic reformist or radical candidate from challenging the incumbent president, that corpse of a man that happens to be in the White House, but it's also intended to make it extremely difficult for an opposing candidate of the other party to get those electoral college votes. That's not democratic by any stretch. And people are seeing this. They're understanding this system is actually rigged. Yeah, they can claim that there's been voter fraud. They don't need voter fraud to do. The parties can make it happen any way that they want to. We all know how and I call them undemocrats, are using lawfare to craft electoral opposition in the upcoming elections. And I'm not going to go into that, but there are some serious constitutional legal issues here. And none of this can be undone. The ruling class can't go back and fix the damage that it's caused, and things are only going to get worse. And these cynical moves aren't even in the back room anymore. They're standing naked out in the open, right on the corner. The ruling class screams relentlessly about a rules-based order without telling you that it is their rules, their order, and they aren't even bound to the rules that they make. Now, do you enjoy such political and legal movements? Why don't you? Electoral and legislative reforms are dead ends when the institutions of the system are the domains and are the servants of the ruling class. You can vote until your legs fall off. You can't change a system by voting. The ruling class is never going to willingly be voted out or reformed by some laws which they themselves craft and apply. It doesn't matter what you and I and the masses have to say anymore. Ours is a moribund system, and it cannot and it will not deliver the will of the people any longer if it ever did. So what will happen? Well, the crisis is going to keep deepening, and there will be eventually a complete breakdown of authority and governance. The masses will no longer tolerate their political alienation and their lack of legislative agency. So what is to be done? Which, by the way, is the title of a really good political strategy book. If you haven't read What is to be Done, get yourself a copy and read it. So what do? Well, first of all, number one, we reject the ideological narratives emanating from the organs and the institutions of the ruling class. We don't believe a damn thing that they say. There's a lot of projection going on. If you notice when politicians talk about something that they are against, they're doing that very thing themselves. It's all sort of they use all kinds of distractions and diversions to keep us from looking at the reason for the problem. The second thing that we need to do is raise our consciousness that we are not only just a class, but that we can rule ourselves for ourselves. We no longer need the professional political careerists and the bureaucrats who are not serving us. We don't need them. We don't need them. We don't have to have them. We can rule ourselves. The third thing you can do is organize on a local level. Your workplaces, small political groups, reading groups. Join revolutionary political parties. There's a couple out there. Get involved. Political apathy is antithetical to freedom, to liberation, and to democracy. If you're not going to take up the struggle, if you're not going to do anything political, then you don't have any reason to be complaining, and you don't have any legitimacy in the arena of ideas, political ideas. You got to get involved. You got to get involved. The fourth thing is disabuse yourselves of the idea that voting will eventually reform or restore the old way. It cannot. It will not. Voting cannot and will not repair anything. There must be a complete overthrowing of the old order, of the old structures, and the building of a new society on the principles of real democracy and the dominance of working class rule of working class order and of working class law. Is it easy to do? No. Is it peaceful? No. The present ruling class will kill you if they have to keep their position as the dictating ruling class. If it came down to it, the people that you put into office would kill you. Someone once wrote, "The organs of the state are the instruments in the hands of the ruling class, used to break the resistance of the adversaries of that class." There's just no other way out of this crisis. Now stop watching this damn video, raise your class consciousness, take courses on political economy, organize, agitate, and lay the foundations for a new social and a new economic order. I'm Jay. We completed the agenda.